straight to it, Russell. Oh,
Okay.
so good morning, everybody. Welcome to Wise Women Weekdays with me, Karen Dodd, and my regular guest, I would say, Russell Paul Arthur. Sorry, I'm really rubbish with names, especially if you're not using your surname, and there's a reason for that. I take it. These three names are all yours, are they? Were you gifted them?
First and middle names gifted by my mother and father, yes.
So Russell and Paul and Arthur. Why'd you go for Arthur?
Arthur, yes, that's my granddad, my
Oh,
mother's father, and he was a right old character. He was.
I
He
think
was a
most.
he was a
Go on. He was a what?
he was a proper East End gangster
I was going
type.
to say, was he a Peaky Blinder? Although they're from Birmingham, aren't they? Peaky Blinders. Excuse me for doing that. But was it because there was an Arthur in Peaky Blinders, wasn't there? Arthur, right? Arthur
He was very much on the darker side of life,
on the
Arthur.
dark side.
But what a character! What a character!
I think anybody with the name Arthur, even that cat, there was a white cat that did things with the paws. 8 out of 10 cats prefer something. Do you remember it years ago? And he was called
I recall
Arthur.
it. I recall.
Yeah, he put his paw. I'm doing being a cat, putting his paw in a tin and anyway, that was cruel, whatever they did. I'm sure Arthur the cat didn't prefer, although he was white. Anyway, sorry, Russell Paul Arthur. I've had one of those mornings already. I have hens, I have chickens, and I went out this morning to let them out. And my favorite, not my favorite, I love you all, but the big fat mama, she's dead, which is really
Oh,
sad. Yeah, it's a bit sad actually when you lose a hen because I get attached to my hens. They're rescue hens, but this
yeah.
one wasn't. This was it's called a Brahma, and it's a big mama, lovely, and she's got a boyfriend. I call them the king and queen, King
Okay.
Coco and Queen Cornelia. Because when you get hens or chickens, normally you have to get a trio because of
Okay.
cockfighting. You can't normally get a cockerel on its own because people have them for cockfighting, which I think is illegal over here, not over there where you are. But so I got a cockerel and two hens, but the hens, because they were little when I got them, one of them transgendered and became another cockerel. So I had two
Interesting.
cockerels, and then it was interesting because you don't know. And then the first cockerel called Kevin the cockerel, he came with that name. He was very vicious and really, really vicious to the extent that even a big bloke could not go into the chicken coop to go and get the eggs or clean them out. He would run at you and
Oh,
attack you with the spurs. So
right.
I didn't know what to do with him really, but then God took over and the fox came along. And anyway, I'm rambling about chickens because I've had one of those
That is
days
right.
today. Yeah, that's life, isn't it? It's just all things happen. What are we going to talk about today, Russell Paul Arthur?
Yes, okay. So today we are going to get into a subject known as the Estate Reformation. So this
Whoa.
is a crucial part of sovereignty, and it's a crucial part of stepping into a new life and diverting your creative energy towards building a new world paradigm that humanity is absolutely screaming out for. And one of the ways that we do that as part of our journey going into sovereignty is to do the lawful procedure known as the estate reformation. So that's what we're going to get into today in this presentation.
Thank you. And as a reminder to people, it's really important because I think you've just highlighted that it's a new world paradigm, not order. Not a new world order, but you've really got to embrace this. I keep saying this to people. You can't just go in and say, right, I'm going to change my name and I'm not going to do this, that, and the other. You've got to embody it, haven't you? It's a big, big thing. It's an amazing thing to do. I think it's freeing you in the true sense of the word. But if you're going to take this on, then, you have to really embody it. It's a spiritual journey as well as a practical one. And can I also just mention, Russell, that the person that put a comment in the box the other day, you have responded. And if anybody does have comments or wants to come and have a chat with me and with Russell, then send me a message because I'm sure we could do that, couldn't we? If anybody does want to come on and
Absolutely.
yeah, because it is about being honest and trustworthy and answering all the questions so that you can embody this new world paradigm. I'll be quiet
Sure,
now.
yes. 100%. Yeah, we've got to bring both our perspectives to the table and allow them to be spoken so we can look at them and see if we can make sense and come
Yeah.
to some kind of understanding of what is the best way forward. Because the way I see life is it's the best method or the best idea that should rise to the top, and that's the one that we go for, rather than the ego that's presenting it and defending it.
Cool.
It seems to be the
Absolutely.
way of the world.
Yeah.
Are you okay for me to start sharing this presentation?
I'm with bated breath.
Okay, let's crack on with this. I'm going to share my screen right now, and now we should be moving into play. It takes a little bit of time. Good. Are we there? Can you see this?
Part one, estate reformation. Yes.
Good. So yes, we're starting with part one, and we'll hopefully meet again to part two. And this is all about establishing a new private estate to build and protect wealth. So very, very important, especially in the current world paradigm that we've got at the moment. And as we always do, Karen, we've got the disclaimer and advisory for your viewers to press the pause button and take a moment to read, which is very important that they do. And then we're going to move on just to remind ourselves of the situation of citizenship, the status of citizenship that we've spoken about in great depth and detail, how the whole thing is a deception and fraud, how through birth registration, each and every one of us had our life converted into a citizen. The citizen is a legal title and legal person that only exists as a character of law, defined by terms of law. And the citizen is a legal franchise under the paramount authority and control of the Crown and State. That means the Crown and State own the title of the citizen and own and control everything the citizen does. And the citizen is not real. So everyone that's watching this presentation, you are a living man or woman, and unfortunately, you have been duped into playing the role of a citizen for the nation state. So let's just move on swiftly again, just to remind ourselves of citizenship, because this gives us contrast to what we're going to be getting into. So citizenship is a diminished status and standing where everybody as a registered citizen operates in a public domain. The public domain is a venue and jurisdiction, is an area of control and extortion created by the Crown and State. And you as a citizen operate in the public domain with a public status and public estate. Your wealth, everything that you think you own, you don't, and control, whether that's real estate property, business ventures, your money, and everything else, and personal possessions, on and on and onwards. It's all contained in public trusts with various public agencies, and where you, as the citizen, have been unknowingly designated as a trustee. So these are implied public trusts. They haven't been expressed, they haven't been disclosed. They exist by the pure fact that they are the arrangement that you have with these public agencies aligns with every principle and every operation of trust law, and therefore they are trust arrangements. And you are managing public property. So even though you think it's your own personal property, it's not. It's public property that's privately controlled by you as a trustee, and you're there to settle all the liabilities and manage that public property. And in this game, in this current world paradigm, each and every citizen is a legal title holder of everything they think they own, and they trade with financial debt instruments. So whether that's financial contracts in the form of mortgages or financial agreements, or whether that's fiat currency, all of it is being traded as part of a public debt administration, because the public domain is an area of control and an area of debt. And you have all been, unfortunately, we have all been, let's say, been deceived and deprived from the absolute title and equity of our estates, because when you become a registered citizen, the absolute title of your actual life gets split, because you are now put into a public trust arrangement where you, as the living beneficiary, in the private, hold the equitable title to your life. And that includes everything that you create in the public domain. But you, as a registered citizen, are the legal title holder and hold the legal title to everything. So they've split the title of everything within this public domain. That's the current situation at the moment with citizenship. It is a diminished status and standing. And before I move on, Karen, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just a question related to the trust, really. And I thought if I don't ask now, I'll forget. So, and this comes from somebody that I know has set up a private trust. So there's somebody that was fighting the system. They said, we, because of they're aware of how we've all been played, and they said, well, I'm a a dead entity, a straw person, whatever you want to call yourself, and therefore I'm not going to pay. And they were going through all this, they were changing their status and all that kind of stuff, and they were having the bailiffs on the door because they said they didn't want to pay the bills. So they were going through all that. They've gone through the work. So then everything's now been put in the trust, and they had this debt, let's say, because they didn't want to pay the bills, whatever they are, utilities, council, TV license, whatever they were. And then because it's now gone into a trust, the trustees have paid the bill on behalf of the benefactor, basically. So
Mhm.
I personally can't really see the point of that because if you don't want to pay the bills, and I'm not saying don't pay your bills because I think we do have a responsibility to live in a civilization to pay bills. We need roads and police and doctors and stuff like that and schools. But I'm thinking if you are fighting the system, you say I don't want to, but I'm going to shove it all in a trust, and then the trust therefore has to pay the bills as well. Is that correct?
Okay, so let's get into that. That's such a crucial thing that you've mentioned there. So it's really important that we give it a due diligence. Let's begin with the fact that even though everybody has been duped into playing the role of a citizen, which we know as a legal entity within their system, we are still, as living men and women, the bonded surety for that citizen. So it was us that went and formed the contract, and it was us that signed the contract, even though it's in the name of the citizen, and that bonded us as being responsible and liable for everything the citizen does. So that means you can't just stop paying for things. Your actual life itself as a living man or woman, even though we found out that the whole thing is a fraud, we still have ourselves bonded ourselves to those contracts. And we are still responsible and liable to pay the debt. So you should never, ever just stop paying the debts. You should continue to pay those obligations because you are committed to those obligations. When you put everything, transfer everything into a private trust, this is how we do it within our academy, is that we're setting everything up so that we claim the equity of our estate within the public domain. So all the equitable interest that we have in everything that we've ever built in the public domain, we claim all that, put it into a private trust. Then we say to the members of our academy, you have two options here. You can do one of the things, and continue to pay currency to settle the debts if you don't want to cause any disruption to these services, because let's get this right. If you stop paying any debts, or if you start to challenge everything and fight everything, it always comes back to contract law. You've signed a contract. You are a bonded surety in some way or form or the other. So you are obligated to pay the debt. So if you stop paying the debt, you're going to cause problems. So we say, listen, you can continue paying with currency, or the second option you have, which is the whole point of setting private trusts up and claiming equity, is that you can discharge all your debts with equity. Okay, because equity acts like a private credit to discharge debts. Now, that scenario where you can use the equity of your estate to discharge all the public debts still comes with its conflict with the public domain, because unfortunately, all these public agencies in the public domain are mind conditioned actors that are working from scripts. They know what they know. They only know a certain amount, and most of them are operating in complete ignorance of the law and have no idea of how the law of equity or the maxims of equity works. And so, therefore, when we start establishing our private trust with them, we're stating it very clear that we're claiming all the equity and that we can use the equity to settle the debts. That does not mean that they are going to discharge debts when we send instruments back to them and say, listen, I've accepted this instrument. I've accepted the equity that's embedded into it because that belongs to me. I've now claimed it. I now want you to settle the debt on that instrument using the equity. That does not mean they're going to do it. So that can get you into complications where you're going in a few back and forth cycles with these public agencies. That could cause disruptions to your services. That could cause problems with especially when you start dealing with the bigger stuff like the mortgage contracts, the big finance agreements. That can cause complications with the finance companies and mortgage companies. So we say to our members, you have two options. Pay with currency, continue settling the debts, continue paying everything until you restructure your life in the private, which is what we're going to talk about in this presentation. Or you can go through the process of attempting to get them to use the equity and compel them to use the equity, although it might not work in your favor. All right, so those are the options. We generally tell our members that if you're going to start with something very small. Start
Yeah.
with the council tax first. Don't go with the big mortgage companies, the big finance companies where they've got a lien, they've got a bond attached to your actual property where that could put your property at risk and obviously impact your life. Start with something small. Start with a council tax bill. Approach your local council tax with first accepting one of their instruments and then sending it back to see how they respond because different councils respond in different ways. What
Okay.
you'll find is, and what we're finding with a few of our members is that those who do choose to do it, eventually what happens is after a process of going back and forth, and it generally takes 2 or 3 months, they stop sending the letters, they stop responding, and the matter just goes away. Because what eventually happens is the document gets kicked up to the top levels, and those at the top really know what's going on. So it's a process of making sure you protect yourself and move forward due diligence and don't do anything to jeopardize your life and property. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does make sense. I wanted to jump in straight away because when you're saying using equity, I'm thinking,
Yes.
what is equity? I think I know what it means, but from what you said, I don't because I'm thinking, are we using our
Yeah.
assets? Are we using the interest? When you're saying use equity,
Yeah.
what exactly is the equity? Is it
Yeah.
interest?
Look, it's the value. It's the value of everything that you own. It's the value of your estate. Because what you got to remember is at the moment, everything is set up in public trusts.
Mm.
So in these public trusts, let's say, for example, you've got HM Land Registry. So you've registered your property and they've set up an implied public trust. They've handed you a property title and they've handed to you as the designated trustee, which means you're holding the legal title to the property. The equitable title, which belongs to you as the living beneficiary of the trust, that is held back from you. That's held with the HM Land Registry. That's never issued to you. You've just got the legal title. So all you've got is the legal title to the property, which means you have legal responsibility to manage the property and settle any taxes, debts, charges, penalties, and everything else that's thrown at it. And then you've got the financial debt side of things. So if you've got a mortgage on the property, then you've got a financial debt for 20, 25, 30 years. And that's debt being paid with debt because you're paying it with a fiat currency. So in the public, it's all debt. All you can do with debt is you can never pay anything off. You can't pay anything with debt. You can only discharge debt with debt. So what happens is the equity is secured in these public trusts. All these public trusts are secured as part of the Crown Commonwealth, and the Crown Commonwealth sits with HM Treasury on a private ledger because HM Treasury hold the entire equity of the nation state on a private ledger, which is the equity of the Commonwealth. And then on the public side, which is the public domain as well, the public debt administration is going on where all the legal titles are. And it's a strange thing to get your head around, but once you actually get your head around that, you then realize that when you go through the process of transitioning from citizenship to sovereignty, you're turning everything around, you're changing the dynamic. So what you're doing is you're disclaiming the fact that you're a citizen and a trustee. You're severing and separating your actual life from the citizen and being a trustee. You're now coming forward as the living beneficiary to claim your estate back from the nation state or from the Crown and HM Treasury. And what you're doing is you're actually claiming the equity that's all in the trust that's set up. The equity is the actual value of the property.
Okay, so if I get this right, and I'm still not quite
Yeah, go on.
understanding it, I do understand it, but I don't understand it because to me, I'm thinking, let's take away the mortgage. Let's just, no, any debt. It doesn't matter at the moment because I've got another
Yes,
question. If you've got a mortgage or a council tax and you've got to pay your 500 quid a month or whatever, and you pay through fee, you pay through the normal system
yeah,
as a straw person, straw man. I get that, obviously. When you come out of the system and you become this sovereign being, you're using your equity, which you're
yes,
entitled to, which you've given away, but you've claimed back. But what
yes.
is that equity? What exactly is it? Where have we got it from? Is this linked to the SESCOV? Is it something they've been using us as commodity? What is it? If I've still got to find £500 a month, where am I getting that from?
Yeah, so that's the equity of your actual estate. That's the value of your estate. That's everything that you've created,
Right.
you earned, and you own.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
at the
Okay.
moment, yeah, because at the
So,
moment,
sorry,
go
but
on,
does that mean therefore it's the same? You know, gosh, how
go
can I
on.
say it? It's the same as like being, the dead person walking. I just say straw man because it's easier for me. I have blonde moments. So if you're the straw man, you're paying your debt. I totally get that. And if you take everything out and put it in your private estate, you're saying you still have to choose to pay the debt, but from your private estate, you're still paying £500 a month, even though it's in your private estate.
Yes, but you're not actually paying. You're not parting with any currency. You're not parting
So
any fiat
right,
currency.
so this is what we're
Yeah,
getting to. So you're
yeah,
using the equity. So what are you parting with to keep them off your back?
yeah. So let's
What are you giving them?
yeah, this is very important that you're getting into, and I'm really glad you are. So let's keep it simple. Let's go back to, let's say, a council tax payment. Let's say the council tax. I've sent you a monthly a bill saying, right, you owe this amount council tax this month. Yeah, what they've actually sent to you is a financial debt instrument. Okay. Now, in the public domain, in the Public Debt Administration, all financial debt instruments must comply with the bills of exchange. And because it's a financial debt instrument, it must be underwritten by some form of equity. And all financial debt instruments are underwritten by the equity of the Commonwealth, and they are underwritten by anyone that endorses or signs the document as the citizen, because what they're doing is they're using you as the creditor, if you like. Yeah, and your credit, your signature when you when you accept the document, is you are actually activating the document, you are endorsing the document, and you are bringing that document alive with equity to underwrite the document, which is what you are. You are, your actual life is equity. Everything you've built and done within the public domain is equity, is value, and you back every financial debt instrument that is issued to you in the name of the trustee or in the name of the citizen. So what you could do is you could get a council tax bill if you're still receiving them by post, and if you're going to do this process through our academy, we suggest that if it's all in direct debit, you get it removed from direct debit and get it put back into post. As soon as the council tax bill comes through, you would sign accepted on the top of the bill to say that you've accepted the instrument. You would then send the bill back with a notice of deed to say that you've accepted and claimed the equity that's embedded into the document. And then you instruct the trustee that you've appointed the council to now use the equity of the instrument to discharge the actual debt, which is the face value of the instrument with the equity. And they know exactly what you mean at the top levels of the council, especially the financial chief officer. And that's what we're dealing with when it comes to
Got
very
you.
simply discharging bills of equity. Every financial debt. So let's look at the mortgage contract, for example. When you go and form a mortgage contract, when you put your signature on that mortgage contract, it's the actual value or the equity of your life in terms of what you have in collateral, in terms of your future worth of what you're going to earn over the next 30 years, and use that money to pay back the mortgage. That's the collateral and the credit that's backing the mortgage contract. That's the equity that backs the debt. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm glad I asked because I'm sure a lot of people don't kind of get it as well until it's
Yeah,
explained. But and my other question, so you're talking about contracts. So a contract is an agreement, yeah? So a
yeah,
law abiding legal document. And also, I think we need to just confer or just go through the difference between law and legal for people because that's quite a big point as well. But anyway, it's a legal document. So when
yes.
you take out a mortgage, you sign it and that's it. You sign yourself up for 20, 25 years, whatever it is. When you have a council tax, you haven't signed anything. Where's the contract? They're just sending stuff through your post. So there is no legal, lawful contract other than we are, an obligation or a demand. And a demand is, I think, something you don't have to do. So just throw that
Yeah,
one
of
at you.
course. Yeah, that's a valid question. So this goes all the way back to the birth registration, because the birth registration and the birth certificate is the master bond. It's the master contract, absolutely everything.
Okay.
So it does. So the council is a local government. It's a subdivision of the government. So is the registrar office. It's a subdivision. So the moment your life is registered as a citizen at birth, and you get a birth certificate, which is a certificated bond, then you are in contract with the Crown and State. And from that point onwards, it's known as an adhesion contract,
Okay.
which means it's a unilateral contract. They can change the terms of the contract anytime. They don't need to get consent from you. So the local council is the local government. On the basis that you are a registered citizen and they've got you on their books as a registered citizen, they can form anything they want and send it to you as the citizen to deal with it as a liability, as a trustee in their public trust arrangement.
Yeah.
And if you're sitting at home and you're going along with it, through voluntary consent, because obviously you don't know any different, you don't know how it's all set up, then you are complicit in it.
Yeah.
So it's all mutual the whole way. It's all mutual
Yeah.
consent the whole way along the way. And what people like myself and everybody else in the sovereignty movement is doing is we're actually waking you up to the what's really going on and how it's all structured and how everyone has been deceived into the role of the trustee and the citizen, who's playing in a world of debt, of financial debt instruments and paying with currency, where really the truth of the matter is you are the living beneficiary of everything, the true owner of everything you've created, except that you have not been granted that position in your relationship to the state, the Crown Estate. When we register our lives at births, we are automatically converted into the citizen. Our actual life, the absolute title of our actual life, is split. The equitable title of our life is on the right side as the beneficiary of everything we do, and then we hold the legal title, playing the role of the citizen, on the public side. So that's pretty much
Yeah.
how it's set up, and that's what I'm bringing to everyone's attention with these
Yeah.
presentations going forward.
And I'm really pleased I asked that because it's something it's always been in the back of my mind. And people say, well, I haven't signed a contract. But the fact that you said,
Yeah,
well, your birth certificate is the umbrella, you've signed yourself away, or you've been signed away through everything whilst you're living in the
yes.
mainstream.
And what we do, Karen, is when we claim the equity of our estate, we create a private estate trust, and we've spoken about this in previous presentations. We create a private estate trust. We actually claim the birth certificate,
Yeah.
and we put the birth certificate into this trust, because that birth certificate is where the equity of the estate is actually vested in that birth certificate as a bond to your estate that's being controlled by HM Treasury. So once that birth certificate has been accepted and claimed by you as the living beneficiary, and once you put it in a private trust, that's it. You've claimed the equity of your estate. Now you can go back to all these public agencies if you wish to use the equity of your estate, and that requires you to go through a process of challenging the public agencies through your documents and maybe causing some disruption with what's going on. Then you can use the equity of your estate to discharge all the public debts. Hopefully that's
Yeah, that's clear. And I think also what you've just added there makes me think some people might just want to reclaim their identity, their birth certificate, their status correction. They might be happy with that and
yes.
continue to pay the bill. So you can take it to whatever level you want, because there is an advantage of just taking back your status, isn't there, and becoming a free person without having to say, well, I'm not paying this bill, I'm not paying that bill. You don't have to go down that route. It's just enough to be truly sovereign.
Exactly, and the very fact that you're setting everything up into private trusts, where you control everything in the private under a private law, which is the terms and conditions of the trust, is you taking back control and taking back your authority and power for these public agencies, and that prevents them from doing anything unlawful, corrupt, and unjust against you and your
Yeah,
trust that have all been formed in equity, which is the law of laws, which is the law of
yeah.
justice. So very, very important, and also we think it's important that every sovereign man or woman should make a decision as to how far they want to go with this. We just provide the options. You can take it this far, you can do that. It's totally up to you. We'll support you every step of the way. So that's very important.
And I'm just going to add here for people that might be watching this, that, and I'm sure most people that are watching this kind of have a clue about what's going on. But what's coming our way is I'm not a fearmonger person at all, but I'm sure we all know with the digital ID and all that stuff, the control that they want from us is unbelievable and very unfair and very unjust at the moment. And when you mention councils and stuff like councils, well, they're like an umbrella of the government. They are being given so much more authority now, as like landlords, for example. On the 1st of May, there's something called the Renters' Rights Act that's coming out in favour, they think it's in favour of the tenants. This is in the UK. Ultimately will affect the tenants because most landlords are leaving the market. I'm one. I've rented property all my life and rented out property, and I think I'm quite a fair landlady. But if if you make an administrative error, if for instance don't send out a document, then the council can fine you £7,000 just for this one error. £7,000, and the council have the right to choose what they do with the money and whether they fine you or not. So it's very, very scary what is coming. And I know that I'm just saying that because I'm a landlord, but this is coming across every aspect, every business, whether you're talking about farms or shops. It's very scary what's coming. So the importance of taking back your sovereignty is huge.
I want to speak to what you've just said there. So you are quite right. We are now living in a world so much corruption and injustice that everything is becoming very disproportionate at the moment. Yes, obviously there needs to be law and order. Yes, there obviously needs to be disciplinary measures where people have done things that are wrong, so we can correct things and we can all live in a just world. But yeah, these organisations are beginning to raise and raise and raise the bills and penalties that they're doing. In that particular situation that you mentioned, which was a £7,000 fine, right?
Yeah,
It's so outrageous, it's so disproportionate, it's so unfair as a penalty, and that's where the good work that we're doing comes into its own, because we're operating from a place of the law of equity. And as I mentioned there earlier, law of equity is the law of laws, and it provides justice where there has been injustice from anyone that's administrating any affairs in the public to do with law. So in that particular example, there is a maxim of equity called equity abhors an unfair forfeiture. So if you have been penalised and given us and penalised with a sum of money that is way, way out of proportion to what it should be, then the law of equity will address that, because that would be totally unfair, and then you can hold these agencies accountable.
accountable.
But
Yeah.
what's also important, Karen, is the fact that you've put everything into private trusts. So all these private trusts that we do to correct our status and protect our estate, they are all formed in equity. So what we're doing is we're claiming the equity that we have in these public interests. We're putting it into a private trust, and where that private equity is now protected by the private laws of the trust. And if the public agency does not have a prior agreement or contract with the private trust, which they won't have, they have no right to attach a claim to the equity. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So they can send these bills out all they want, but if they have not got a prior agreement with the private trust that we've now set up in equity to protect our equity, and we will just send a letter back to them from the Office of Executive from our estate to say, listen, okay, you've sent this bill out. Can you please provide me with proof that you have authorization to claim anything from this private trust?
Yeah.
Which they can't, because they don't have any proof, because they don't have a contract with a private trust. So again, the good work that we're doing here is to protect everything in private trusts, to prevent any injustices or corruptions from happening, and where we're in good standing authority to literally defend our estate and back these things off and back these things back to them. So hopefully again that sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
So good.
Right. Okay.
Should we move
Let's.
on? So, very briefly, the current world paradigm. So, widespread hardship and suffering. And look, I know it's not all hardship and suffering. There are great things going on in the world out there, but it's becoming significantly more and more as we go on, as the decades roll on. We can all see that things are getting worse and worse out there, from all the wars, the poverty, the famine, the disease, and the crisis. And once you actually start to, how do I say, detach yourself from the current world, you start to imagine a better world, and you start to realize that this world could be so much better than what we're doing at the moment. You understand that there is no need for this widespread hardship and suffering, that we could actually build a more fairer, brighter, and honourable world. So the situation that we have when it comes to sovereignty is that if we do continue building our life and estate in the public domain, then all of our energy, time, labour, and production will support the societal systems of injustice, deception, corruption, and everything else that dishonours life. So at some point, although all of our lives are entangled in this public system, and we need to continue this public system, our interest in the public system to continue to support our life, at some point, we need to divert our energy, focus, and creative powers into building the world that we actually want to see. We need to make that shift, and that's what we're going to start talking about today. So sovereignty, I think this confirms what we spoke about earlier. So sovereignty is where you execute lawful procedures to cancel citizenship and assert your natural and inherent rights to live free and independent with sovereign authority to govern your own life and estate. And Karen, in all the previous presentations that we've done, we've spoken about a procedure known as the status correction, and a state reclamation, and a status protection. And all of those lawful procedures is how we restructure our life in the public domain to protect our life and estate in the public domain. And that brings us to this, what we're going to speak about today, which is the estate reformation, which I think is the future of wealth building. You may agree with me, you may not. We're going to find out. So, with an estate reformation, you can build a new private estate as a charitable and missionary organization that privately manages and builds multi-generational wealth with equity invested in new world services and systems that benefits and evolves humanity. What do you think?
I don't know if you froze there. I think that's great. I love it. And the fact that we're talking missionary, I mean, people go, oh, missionaries, but I think ecclesiastical word, that word comes to mind. There's a little bit of safety, isn't there, if you set up something ecclesiastical, churchy.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. There's a lot of people doing that in the sovereignty movement. They've found out about those church laws and the religious way of doing things, and how you can get freedom from the current system. And yes, you can do that. We focus on something that's missionary more than religion, because our organization is trying to get away from this religion thing, because I personally believe, and a lot of people within our organization, that the evolution of humanity does not involve religion. My
No.
own personal perspective is that religion is a form of mind control.
I totally agree. It's as a means to control the masses, but I think people have used the ecclesiastical law to set up separate things. So, what can you explain? Obviously, charitable. What would you say missionary is in this context? A missionary organization, this is going out on the front lines, sort of setting things up, or something else?
Absolutely, yeah. So missionary. So you're going out on a mission, which has a charitable nature. So it's a mission of doing good causes in this world. Yeah,
Great.
doing
Yeah.
things that benefits and helps humanity.
Yeah.
You're on a mission. You have a particular focus, a particular area in life that you're going to work on. But it's all about doing things that are a good cause and benefit humanity. Because, as you're about to find out, when you're involved in something that's charitable and missionary, then the state is pretty much going to leave you alone when it comes to taxation,
Yeah.
which is
And
very important.
it's very, very, very important because that's partly what all this is about, isn't it? Partly.
Yeah.
But I think the world is so corrupt, as many people are finding out, and the problem that we have in the world is greed. Everybody has a certain greed, desire, want for something, but greed has really taken over, and that's what I love about this, because this isn't coming, about the individual, is it? It's for the greater good.
Absolutely. And you're so spot on there, because the Crown and State and every registered citizen has a franchise of the Crown and State, and it's all about corporations and commerce. It's all about business and profiteering. It's all about how much I can get for the other person rather than what can I do for the other person. And if we look at all the businesses, just walk down your local high street and look at what we've got in terms of the services being offered to humanity. If you had a really good and honourable government, half of those businesses would be shut. They wouldn't allow it. So it's got nothing to do about doing good causes for humanity. It's about making money, and it's
Yeah.
about getting tax revenue for the government. Because the government doesn't, to a certain extent, the government doesn't care what you do, and they don't care. The government doesn't care if you're good at it or succeed or fail. They just want their tax at the end of the day, so they
Yeah.
can keep the wealth and the power. So let's get into this. The estate reformation. What is the estate reformation? It's creating a private estate that exists in a completely new private domain that is independent and separate from the public domain. And the private estate, Karen, is a unique lawful entity, means it's a lawful entity, an entity created in law that stands in its own stead and rights, with complete independence from any other authority in this world. And it is formed to operate in the private with complete obscurity from public agencies. So this means the private estate that we create as part of an estate reformation does not get registered in the public domain, does not get recorded anywhere in the public domain. It's all in the private. Private means private. Private is confidential. It's got nothing to do with the public or the public domain. And the fact that we're creating this private estate is so that we can now utilize resources to build and develop new world services and systems without state imposed restrictions or regulations. Because if you're operating with a public estate in the public domain, for you to do anything, you've got to go and make sure you've got permission or license, and it's being regulated by some type of agencies that's telling you what you can and can't do. So if there is to be any positive reformation in this world, then we need to be able to operate with complete freedom from restrictions and regulations that allows us to actually use our creative imagination to evolve. Because you only got to go and look at your local village or your local town, and it's just a very dull and repetitive world, isn't it? You can see how highly regulated the world is. All the houses are built the same. It's all this certain measurements. It's got no imagination, no creativity, because human creativity and imagination has been suppressed into restrictions and regulations because everything's controlled. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So the private estate is actually a private estate structure. It stands with supreme authority within its own private sovereign venue jurisdiction and has ultimate independence from all nation states and sovereign organisations in this world. And again, we've mentioned that it's got complete obscurity from all the public agencies. So let's get into the actual structure, Karen, of this private estate. Now, the private estate is formed with another unique lawful entity known as an order of overseer that is formed to administrate the mission of the private estate. So let me explain why we do that. The private estate itself is a unique lawful entity, and it's created to own and hold wealth, to own and hold equity. Then we create the Order of Overseer as a separate organisation to manage the private estate. And the reason that we create it separate is so that the actual equity that's in the private estate is kept separate and isolated from the people that actually manage the private estate. That means that if there's any claims or liabilities attached to the people that manage it, it can't be attached to the equity. The equity is always safeguarded in the private estate. The private estate and its Order of Overseer is overseen by a sovereign man or woman who is positioned as the overseer with a duty to protect and develop the mission of the private estate. So if you go through the transition into sovereignty and you create a private estate, you as a sovereign man or woman are going to become the overseer for the order to manage the private estate. And it's established with a line of succession. So the whole point of us creating this private estate is that we want to create a legacy of wealth. We want to create an estate that's going to last throughout many, many generations, because it's going to take multiple generations to build the wealth that we need to build this new world paradigm. So we need to make sure that the estate can be passed along from one generation to the next. And that gets into estate planning. We're thinking ahead here. We're thinking 50, 100, 200, 300 years down here. We're lining up all our family in line of succession. And by the way, Karen, this is exactly how the crown has been established. It's exactly how the state has been established. We are mirroring what they're doing, but we're doing it in a positive way. We're doing it for the good of humanity. Please lend some perspective to that, Karen, for us.
Well, I don't need to because you said it all. I'm nodding in the background saying yes, 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 because these families that rule the world and like you say, royal families or whatever else, wherever they're coming from, they think long term. It's a long game, isn't it? It's not just whilst they're alive, they're thinking generations ahead, as they have done, because the mess that we're in at the moment hasn't just happened overnight. It has been planned. Oof, from the beginning of time. Well, maybe from the beginning of time. So what we are doing here, we are on the front line creating something new for humanity. So it's brilliant. I love it.
100%. Yes,
Yeah.
good. I'm glad you do. Let's move on to the next one. We're going to really start getting into the rest of the structure of the estate. So now we're going to get into the subject of private benefits. Now, we've spoken a lot about trusts, private trusts. If you look at all throughout the sovereignty community, everyone's really big into trusts. We're doing something a little bit different in our organisation. We are creating our own unique lawful entities called private benefits. Okay, so the private estate structure, you've got the private estate, which is a unique lawful entity. You've got the order of overseer that manages the private estate and a line of succession. Then you have what is known as a master benefit. which again is another unique lawful entity that is created to manage private equity for a charitable mission. And the master benefit, similar to a trust, and we're going to get into the details of the master benefit later, is managed by an order of superseers. And then the master benefit also manages auxiliary benefits that own and hold and manage individual equity to individual assets and interests. And we structure it this way so that it's multi-layered with various different individual benefits so that we isolate individual assets and interests so there is minimum risk and maximum protection for the equity. What happens to one benefit does not affect the other benefit, and they're all created in private, which means if anyone came into awareness and knowledge about one specific benefit, they would not know anything about the other benefits. Everything is private, individual, and separated, but yet it's all part of the same structure. And the beautiful thing about these private benefits, which we're going to get into, is that they can own and hold and build wealth without any tax implications.
Sounds good. Tell me more.
It does. So let's get into the mechanics of a private benefit. So in the arrangement of a private benefit, which is again a unique lawful entity, there are five benefactors. So the private benefit is first created by a court, and it's created by a court order. Okay, so a court arranges an order to initiate the creation of a private benefit. Now, the reason that we use a court order rather than using a grantor or settler, which you would have in a trust arrangement, is because the Inland Revenue, the HMRC, have what's known as a grantor trust rule, which means anyone that creates a trust as a grantor means they have automatic venue and jurisdiction over that trust. So anything that we do within our private organisation, we certainly don't want to do it as a trust arrangement, and we certainly don't want a grantor involved in it, where the Inland Revenue can then come along and go, oh, well, you've created that as a grantor, so we're now going to claim any tax on that entity that you've got, regardless of what you call it. So everything's created by court order, and it's created by a court order from our own private court of our own private society, because as sovereigns, we are coming together, we have power in numbers as our own organisation, and if you like, as our own nation state. The next benefactor of a private benefit is the living beneficiary. So the living beneficiary will hold the equitable rights to the private benefit. So that means once the term of the private benefit is over, the beneficiary does have the right to claim the equity, to claim the venue as the value as the true owner of the benefit. Then we have a board of superseers. Okay, so the superseers manage the equity. They have the lawful rights to manage the equity, to do everything they need to secure, advance, develop the equity of the private benefit. And we call it superseers and not trustees, because again, we don't want to implicate ourselves into any trustee laws or any trustee arrangements that are all well known and used in the Crown and State. So we're doing board of superseers. There are no regulations and there are no laws for boards of superseers, and that keeps that element of the benefit protected from any claims that the HMRC might attempt to make over our unique lawful entity. And then the fourth benefactor of a private benefit is a charitable mission. Okay, so when you set up this private benefit, you would also set up a charitable organisation, project, or service that's going to hold the beneficial rights to the private benefit, which means they can benefit from the use of the equity, from the value of the actual benefit to create their organisation, create their project, create their mission. And again, that's to build and develop value and to do good things in the world. And then the fifth benefactor is a living protector. So there is a man or woman that has the lawful rights to protect the benefit equity and to prevent any one of the other benefactors from doing anything that is unlawful, corrupt, unjust, unfair, and that would diminish the mission or the value of the private benefit. And that means that the living protector has veto powers to veto anything that they're not happy with, that perhaps the charitable mission has done or the board of superseers has done. So there's a check and balance in
Right.
place for this private benefit. So there you have it. That's the private benefit. Those are the five benefactors involved. This is a unique lawful entity that we use within our organisations and private estate to set up and manage private equity for charitable and missionary organisations where we can own, hold, build wealth in the private with no tax implications.
Okay.
What are your views
Yeah,
on that?
yeah. So it seems very well set up here. You're bringing in new words, and you can do that because we're in a new jurisdiction. So that's
Yes.
why we don't have to call it trustees and stuff. We call them superseers, and that's fine. So we can, I say, get away with it because we have the right to do that as sovereign beings. We've set that up. So this is very protective. Let me just say that if I put my house in a trust, I go through all these five stages, and I'm also the one at the end. I'm the living protector that I can make the final decisions on what these other people are saying. Is that correct?
Right. So let's get into that. So the court order would set up the private benefit
Yeah.
from a court order. So the documents would be done by the court. You would take the position as the living beneficiary with the equitable rights. Okay. But you liaising with the court can define the terms of the benefit, the private terms, because you as the living beneficiary are also going to set up the charitable mission.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all going to be built into the way that you structure the actual document in terms of terms, conditions, and the private law. The living protector would be someone different.
Okay.
So there's no conflict of interests. So
Right.
you could, if you wanted to, you could instruct the court or a justice at the court to be a protector of the private benefit, or you could ask for someone that you know that is capable of being a protector, that has the competency and the acumen to be a protector of a private trust, but where there's no conflict of interests between you and the protector.
Sorry, can I just say this alarm bells come out here a little bit because, as I say, we are living in a world of sadly, greed and corruption. And I'm not saying everybody is greedy and corrupted because we're trying to create this new world, which is really important.
Yes.
But if I am putting my house into a trust or whatever you want to call it, um, and you're giving authority to somebody else, even if it's in this new jurisdiction, they have the veto to change things. If I'm saying, I don't want anybody to come in my house on a Wednesday, the living protector could turn around and say, well, it doesn't matter, so we will let somebody come in the house on a
Okay.
Wednesday.
Yeah, that's such a valid thing you mentioned. I'm glad you did. So let's again get into this a little bit more. All the private terms that go into the benefit. So let's say that term you don't want someone coming into your house on a Wednesday. That would become a private term and a private law written into the benefit document, and the living protector can do nothing about that. They can't change that. They can only veto things that go outside the scope of the document. So let's say you've got the board of superseers because you're going to entrust the board of superseers to manage the property for you. Let's say the board of superseers decide to do something that's not within the private terms of the trust, which is not something that you pre-agreed when you set up the private benefit from the very start. That's when the living protectors would come in and veto it. So no, you can't do that. That was
Okay.
not the original intention of this private benefit. That is not a term that's written into this document. So no, you can't do that. Does that make sense?
It does. Okay. So the person
Yeah.
that puts the stuff into me, I'm putting my house into the trust, I decide all the rules, all the regulations, and then
Yes.
they have to follow that. So that's great. Two questions come up. Who are the superseers? Where do we get the board? If, let's say I'm going to go along with it. So who's going to be my superseer?
Okay, so again, that's something that you're going to select as the sovereign who's setting up this private benefit and making the arrangement from the very start. So you would need to interview appropriate candidates who you think would be suitable to take the positions of superseers as a board, as three people that are going to manage the equity of this benefit. So that's either going to be people that you know, or that's going to be independent professionals that you hire, or you're going to now turn within to the private society if you've joined a private society. And you're going to, if you form relations and communications with other members, you might interview them and you might arrange for them to become a superseer. But you do need to arrange for free living men or women to become the board of superseers to manage the benefit for you.
And are they doing this? I know it's obviously a decision between me and the superseers, the trustees or whatever, but is this as a paid role for them, or they're doing it out of kindness, or am I therefore going to be a superseer on their trust? How does that work?
So, okay, however you set it up,
Okay.
if you come to an agreement with the superseers that they're going to do this out of goodness of heart because they're going to volunteer their time, they can do it. Or if there is going to be some sort of payment arranged, that can be it. It all comes down to how you decide to set up this private benefit. That's where you come in under your own sovereign authority to define the terms of everything before you set it up. Also, this is very important to mention, Karen, is that you, as the living beneficiary, could also be an executive superseer.
Whoa, look at me. Do I get a badge? I am an executive superseer. Do I have wings and I can fly?
As the executive superseer, this is what you can actually do. You can actually get involved to a certain degree with the management of the benefit. So you can actually oversee what they're doing, the board of superseers. You can be involved in the process of them making decisions on what they're planning to do. You can actually manage whatever equity or property or anything else that's involved in that benefit as the executive. But what you can't do as the executive is you cannot be involved in the final decisions that are made by the board of superseers, where they must come to a majority of vote to actually action anything in terms of
Okay.
managing the equity.
It's very protected. Again, I like this very much, and obviously I like it. It's what it is, isn't it? It's great. Your explanation is great. And for those people that are thinking of joining your academy, will you go through in more detail things like this? Because if people say, "Yeah, I want to put it in a private trust, but I don't know anybody," you support people? Can you hold their hand all the way, or there's somebody there to hold their hand all the way?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. We can provide all the guidance and support. And if anything they're not quite sure, we walk it through with them. We've got all the sample documents. They can read examples of how private benefits are set up. We give them many different presentations and illustrations to help them understand the concept, the principles and structures of these
That's
private benefits.
great.
And they're going to be learning throughout the whole academy, they're going to be learning all these different laws and how they can actually structure, whether it's a private trust, an association, a contract, or a private benefit. The whole point of this course is that they become competent in law, competent in creating these unique lawful entities without us having to do anything. Yes, at the very start, we're going to need some
Yeah,
guidance, they're going to need support. But once you've got it, once you start to step into your true sovereign power, realize that you can create anything you want, you can stipulate any terms and conditions you want, and off
yeah,
you go.
yeah.
It's
Down
really
to
down
you.
to you. And it
I
all
think.
becomes, sorry, Karen, and what we're trying to do is we are providing the templates through all the studying and experience and knowledge that we've got that shows you how to do it peacefully, honorably, and lawfully, where you can actually create these things without them being attached to any of the controls and extortions in the public domain. That's what we're doing.
It's a total change of being, isn't it? When you become totally sovereign, because you realize the power that you have, and it just gives you so much confidence to just stand up straight and walk tall, and just say no to so
Yes.
many things. I just want to come back to something that you mentioned regarding the public trust and the grantor, so that I understand it, or people understand again the difference between a normal a trust in the public domain and a trust in the private domain. You mentioned that a grantor or somebody could go into a public trust and fiddle around a little bit. Is that true? Surely, if a trust is set up by somebody in any domain, nobody else has the right to open it up and change things.
Yeah. So it depends what type of trust you're creating. So if you're creating a revocable trust, then the grantor or settler can change the terms of the trust. They
And that's
can
in, but
revoke
that's in public or private, because it is, you can
that.
revoke it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can revoke it, you can take back the asset or interest, or you can actually alter the terms of the trust. It's revocable, it's changeable. Also, when I spoke about the public trusts and the fact that there is a grantor trust rule from HMRC, that just means they can claim venue and jurisdiction over the trust. So if you've got set up a public trust in the public and you have granted or settled something into that trust as a citizen, then if that trust ends up in a court situation, then the court can take full control and authority and venue jurisdiction over your trust and start dictating what they're going to do with that trust and your assets and your interest and all your equity and rights, which means you are completely powerless in that situation.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why we do everything as court orders is that they can never substantiate or attach a claim to say that our private benefits are set up in their venue jurisdiction. So we've been through the literature on their websites. We've read everything,
Ah,
you know.
right.
So we
Very
understand
good.
where they have jurisdiction. We understand how they claim jurisdiction. So again, let's look at another unique aspect of this benefit that's not on this slide, is that it's set up as a foreign entity. So this is stipulated in the documents itself. We stipulate all throughout the documents that this is a foreign benefit that is not domiciled on any land of any nation state. Okay,
Yeah.
it's foreign to all nation states in this world. And again, if you go onto HM website, they have no rules, no regulations for foreign benefits or foreign trusts. So again, if we look at the private benefit, there is no literature rulings or anything, codes, legislations about private benefits.
Great. And I'm pleased I brought that up because I think
Yeah,
people do need to understand the difference between private and public. And when we've talked about irrevocable, so revocable there. So if it is a trust in the public domain
yeah,
and it's been set up as irrevocable, can powers that be, can they fiddle around with that as well? Can they unrevoke?
absolutely,
They can
one
because you're in
hundred
their
percent.
domain. Okay.
Yeah,
So
because if it's set up as a grantor settler trust where a registered citizen has granted something into that trust, it doesn't matter what the trust is. It could be a living trust, it could be a living estate trust, a property trust, a real whatever the trust is. It doesn't matter. They automatically have venue jurisdiction over it, which means that trust is under their place of law and word of law. Which means the moment you step into a court, they have total authority over that trust to do anything to it without you having any say in it whatsoever. They can
So,
freeze assets.
thinking ahead here. Sorry, because I know we're going. I've got so many questions on this one. But thinking ahead, let's say randomly somebody put their property, their asset, their house. Let's go. They put their house in a trust for the benefit of their kids, which I think is what most people do, to keep it in the family as a legacy. And then one of the kids, let's say there's four kids, or one of the kids, or two of them, doesn't matter, but one disagrees with the other one. Well, let's say one wants to sell it and the other doesn't. One wants to keep it to hand it further down, but the other one wants the money. So it goes to court. I mean, obviously, I know what you're going to say. Well, the trust says that, it was set up, so it has to stay there in perpetuity forever. But let's just say you might have a judge that thinks, well, actually, no, we'll change it. We'll allow that one of the children to sell it. Could that happen? Could the judge in the public domain, could it be like that? I'm just thinking really simple here.
Yeah, that's a great question. So ultimately, we're focusing on trust here at the moment, aren't we? So ultimately, a trust is set up where the terms of the trust become the law or the private law of the trust, and where the trustees, if you've got a board of trustee or one trustee, then they have the legal title to manage the property. Therefore, the property is under their authority and control, and the beneficiary only has the equitable title, which means they only can benefit from the value of the property. They have no rights whatsoever to dictate the terms of the trust. However, if it does end up in the court, and if any of the terms of that trust are found to be unlawful, criminal, depriving or defrauding anybody, that's when the law of equity steps in to right the wrong, to correct the mistake, to make sure that everything is fair and just. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's where a living beneficiary can sort of get an order or judgment in their way. Everything comes back to justice.
Yeah.
What's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
So again, it comes back to setting everything up right in the first instance. So there are none of these problems at a later date. So that really requires someone to sit down with their family members and say, listen, I'm setting this thing up over here. It's a lawful entity. It's going to protect this part of our wealth over here. I want to pass this along to you. You're going to become a beneficiary of this at a later date. I'm going to give you 25%, your sister 25%, and this person 50%, and I'm doing it for this, that, and that reason. Here's the terms of the trust that I'm setting up. Read the terms. Do you want to talk to me? Is there anything you think that's unfair at this point? Do you want me, let's talk this through and make sure we set this thing
Yeah.
up
Yeah,
right
no,
from the start.
I get all
Yeah.
that. I'm just thinking further down the line, too, general, because what we're doing here is setting something up, and I am talking about a public trust, and
Yes.
then I'll be quiet. But I'm just thinking, how safe are these trusts? Because we are living in a world of greed and corruption, if it did go to court, could that irrevocable trust in the public domain be revoked? Could a judge turn around? Because I don't know, it might be paid, it might be bribed or whatever. Is a trust, if it's irrevocable, it cannot be changed no matter what. No matter what.
If a judge in a court process who has ultimate authority in any situations regarding the life and estate of a registered citizen, if that trust has been found to be faulty or fraudulent or with criminal intent or anything, then they could dissolve that trust and create a resulting trust to then manage that property going forward, where they have absolute control of that resulting
Right.
trust.
Okay.
So yeah,
So,
that is a possibility.
only if the trust is faulty. He can't do it just because because he fancied doing it. There has to be
Exactly.
something wrong with the trust. So there is protection, full on protection.
It's 100%, but yeah, any claim that's made in the court has to be a legitimate claim,
Yeah.
has reasonable, has to be substantial, and has to be lawful and performed in equity. But the whole purpose of us doing it within our organisation is that everything is set up with the living protector to protect the trust from any situations, and we've also got the court, our own private court, that's involved with the situation, and everything's set up in private contract law, and it's dealt with by sovereigns, which means if there is an issue with the court, then it's dealt with between the sovereigns, and there is no one judge that has the final decision over everybody else, and there is no one final judge that can take control of the matter and dissolve the trust. It must be dealt with between the sovereigns, not by another authority. That's what makes what we're doing different. We're putting the
Yeah.
power back
To the
where it
people.
should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Shall we move on?
Yes, I'll try not to ask any more questions.
No,
Sorry.
please keep them coming. Keep them coming. If you've got more, I love the questions. So let's get into another aspect of this private estate, the estate reformation. So the whole thing is multi-jurisdictional. So we've got the public domain on the left side, of course, with the Crown, the State, the HM Treasury, and all the public agencies, whether it be Companies House, whether it be HMRC and HM Land Registry, and all the rest of them, DVLA, etc., etc. And then on the private domain is where we're setting up our new private estate with its new order, board of superseers, with all the master benefits and all the auxiliary benefits that are going to hold the equity and rights of our life and estate in the private as sovereigns. Now, of course, we have spoken in previous presentations, haven't we, Karen, about setting up private trusts so that we can contain all our public interests and control them from the private. And if you look on this diagram, if you like, on the left side here, it shows that the private trusts that we have used to contain the public interests, these can be placed into master benefits, holding benefits, to hold them in the private domain. So it really is completely secured all within our new private estate structure. So again, multi-jurisdictional, just because we're setting everything up in a private, just because we're doing all these private trust and private benefits, still does not mean that we are completely isolated or ostracized from society and we can't use any public services or anything. We can still go into a public jurisdiction and we can do it with private trust, and we can hold anything in these private benefits that we set up. That's very important. I want to reassure people that life can continue as it is in the public domain. All you're doing is taking control over the lawful matters of your life and estate and restructuring everything into private trusts so that you take your power back, take your equity right, take your rights back, secure everything from what we all know is a corrupt world and deceptive world that wants to control us, that wants to extort us, that is operating on assumption and presumption that they have the authority and the power when they don't.
Yep.
Let's move on to the next slide. So the estate reformation is a process that takes place through documentation and procedures. If we look on the left side of the screen here, I'm showing you an example of a private estate document and a certificate, which is one of my documents that I've used to set up a private estate. And it's basically executing lawful documents and procedures to establish the private estate, to own and hold wealth that is free from the controls and extortions of the Crown, State, and its public domain. And it is purely a process of documents and procedures to establish all this, because you're doing it all in the private. You're not registering or recording anything in the public. You are simply expressing your sovereign will, intention, and purpose on documents, so that those documents that can be recorded and recognized in our own private court as proof that that is your will and that is your intention to create a private estate and create a charitable and missionary organization. And that brings us to the end of this presentation, Karen.
Oh, wow. Gosh. Well done. Sorry, it's sort of ended quickly. Um, sorry, just fiddling around there.
That's all right.
So, master sovereignty to restore and protect the sovereign freedoms, values, and rights of your life and estate from a corrupt system of control and extortion. I think it's spot on. I'm gonna. You're doing your next course on the 12th of April, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, we're onboarding new sovereigns. I was going to say students, but I call them sovereigns. We're going
Yeah.
to onboard new sovereigns on the 12th, and that's when we kick off with the 10-week free trial. So 10 weeks, I'm going to take everyone through the foundational knowledge and go through all the different laws of how we establish sovereignty. And then after that 10 weeks, everyone can decide whether or not they want to jump in 100% all the way. So yeah, the 12th of April is when we get started.
And it's a long. I mean, a free trial for 10 weeks is it's a lot, but because there's so much to cover. And can you just give me an idea of how the course works, how this trial works? What do people need to do?
They just need to show up. So what happens is they show up on the first onboarding day. So they're going to meet me online with a video, just like this. I'm going to go through the onboarding process with them, which means I'm going to show them the master courses, how they can access them on their private members area on our website. I'm going to show them exactly how the mentorship program goes with me on a weekly basis. And then I'm going to do a quick tutorial with everyone to show them how they can access the private members area and see everything online. Then everyone will go on to their members area on the website. They can start studying all the presentations, studying all the illustrations, and then I'm going to meet everybody once a week online, where we're going to talk about every different aspect of the course, because the entire academy, the master courses and a mentorship program, it's structured. So everyone's learning everything on a
Yeah.
step-by-step basis.
Yeah.
And the 10 weeks is needed, Karen, because there is so much information, there is so much knowledge that everyone needs to know about citizenship and sovereignty, that it's going to take 10 weeks to study it all, to reflect upon it, to contemplate it, to really get yourself in a position where you know whether or not this is the thing for you. So I think 10 weeks is enough. And I think after 10 weeks, people are pretty much confident to go ahead with it, which they typically are. But
And
even after,
yeah, so it's like modular. So let's say they've done 10 weeks and they want more. They want to jump in. How long is the
yeah,
next course,
that,
the
well,
pay?
yeah, fine. So it continues. So what happens is we do the first 10 weeks. So the first 10 weeks, they're actually beginning the course, the beginning of the academy. But we say it's free trial for 10 weeks because they're only studying the foundational knowledge at that point. They're not actually executing any documents and procedures. We start doing that after week 10. So once the free trial run for the first 10 weeks has ended, we then do a roundup of who's in and who's not. And at that point, we then, everyone agrees and accepts a private contract association to become a private member of our society. But everyone studies these documents in the first 10 weeks. We then agree to everything and we set up the donations, because everything's set up on a monthly donation basis. And then we go straight into week 11.
Right.
We get straight into doing preparation works, which people need to learn about how to create the documents, how to create all their sovereign seals, how to get all the estate operatives in place, from the superseers, the overseers, and any beneficiaries and trustees, etc. We do all that preparation work for the next 2 weeks. Then we jump straight into creating our first sovereign documents, where people actually make declarations in their own sovereign name, and they get certificates of recognition from our private society. Then we jump straight into creating the private estate, what we've spoken about in this presentation today. So things move after the first 10 weeks, once we've done the foundational knowledge, we get straight into documents and procedures. We get
And
into the action part.
how long would that take? Is that another 10 weeks or does it go on and on and on?
Oh,
Mm.
it's under 2 years, this
Right.
entire thing, start to finish.
So
So
it's a
there's
massive
a
project, yeah.
huge, and it's just under 90 weeks in total. Huge commitment. This is
Yeah.
serious stuff. This is life-changing stuff. Who you are when you come out of this academy is someone completely different. You'll have a completely different perspective on life. You'll have a completely different swagger. You will have integrated all this knowledge. You will really truly stand in your sovereign power once you've been through this academy.
Yeah,
And it is a huge commitment, and that's why we give the 10-week trial,
yeah,
because we think it's only fair that people are fully informed about what's going on, what we're doing, what all the implications and outcomes are before they commit the whole way. But even that said, Karen, there are stages of the academy that we say, right, we've got to a certain point here. You've done a certain amount of work to restructure your life as a state, but this next bit here, and this bit really is changing because you're now interacting with. We spoke about this before, the declaration of status.
yes,
Say to people, before you do that, you now have
yeah,
an option
yeah,
to leave. You can
yeah,
rescind everything you've done, you go back to as you were, because once you've stepped over this line, there is no going back. Yeah,
yeah.
you've made a pivotal decision in your life. So again, it's been very carefully structured, this entire academy, to make sure that everything is done with due diligence, everything's done modulated, everything's proper, and everyone has a fair opportunity to consent every step of the way. That's very important.
I think it
Everyone's made,
is. Yeah, and my final question is if people go with this and they want to set up their own trusts and do all the work, when they get their superseers, their executive superseers or their trustees, do the trustees, the superseers, need to know all this? Or can you get, your next door neighbor or your, I don't know, your brother or sister who has no idea about this? Or do they need to have a certain knowledge?
yeah, the trustees and the superseers are definitely going to have a degree of competency, a degree of knowledge and skill sets, and a certain amount of life experience. Of course, there has to be diligence in the people that you choose, because we're talking about your life and the state here. So they don't have to have necessarily gone through the whole academy. They will, however, need to be recognised and recorded by our private court as living men and women. And we need to certify that they are, so that they can take their positions as living beneficiaries or living trustees or living superseers. And they will need to have a certain degree of knowledge about the benefits and the trusts and the private estate. But of course, they're going to have access to the documents. So these documents that we're creating to establish everything, these are very comprehensive documents. Everything that they need to know about the private estate or a private trust or a private benefit is going to be written to the actual document itself. It's the whole entire operations of the document is of these unique lawful entities is written into the document, and they can join any one of our forums that we have within our society if they want to learn more once they've gone through a procedure of being recognised and recorded as living man or woman. There's certain procedures that they get involved.
So, yeah.
Uh,
Because that's the point
just
I was going to make. Sorry for interrupting there,
yeah,
but they have to have gone through their own status correction.
they don't.
Otherwise, oh, they don't know. I'm going to say
They don't
otherwise would
yeah,
it be invalid?
they don't have to go through a status correction if they're creating if they're taking a position as a supersede, if they've been recognised and recorded by a private court as a living man or woman,
Okay.
because they are setting up these unique lawful entities within our venue and jurisdiction and not setting them up within the venue and jurisdiction of Crown Estate. So that's very important. We are operating in our own private and sovereign venue and jurisdiction. It's
Yeah.
nothing to do with the venue jurisdiction of the Crown Estate. So, for example, someone in the country of Turkey that's doing something over there is not going to be subject to the venue jurisdiction of the United Kingdom, and vice versa. So we've got to. It's helping people to get their head around the fact that if you're joining a private society, you're almost joining a different nation state. You're
Yes.
stepping into a completely different domain.
Yeah.
And from that point onwards, you have to start getting your head around the fact that, okay, I've been a citizen all my life with the United Kingdom. I'm now a private member of this private society over here. And everything I do within this private society will have nothing to do with citizenship or anything that's being done over there as a citizen. So again, it's keeping,
Yeah.
we're always in two minds.
Cool. Okay, Paul, I think sorry. Well, I'm not sorry for the questions because I'm also trying to think what other people might ask if people that are watching this. So if you have been watching this and I don't know if enjoyed, it could be endured because it's a lot of information, but enjoyed as well. Yeah, I'm sure people have enjoyed it because it's just so much information. But if you've got questions, put them in the little box because we do answer them, as you'll find out if you look at the previous videos that we've done. I think this is number 5 or 6. I can't remember actually, Russell, how many we've done. But yeah, put some comments and put some questions in. We'll get back to you. Please subscribe to the channel. Please like or unlike the videos, but just make some noise, basically. And Russell, are we getting together again? I know we were going to talk about the banking system, so I think that is
We
one that'd be really interesting.
it would be an honor to come back and do some more presentations with you. I've got a part two to this
Great.
presentation where we get
Okay.
into the actual documents and procedures that establishes a private state of benefits, which is very important. I show how we are able to transfer wealth across from the public domain into the private domain, which again is a very important aspect of this. And then, yeah, I have a presentation on the global banking system, on the public debt administration that shows people exactly how they're operating in a world of financial debt instruments where they are public debtors with no access to the equity of their life and estate. And once they can actually see that, then the idea of equity becomes easier to understand
Yes.
in the whole scheme of this thing. So yeah, 100%. I'd love to come back and do that
Great.
presentation.
And I think that's really important for people to see that if you're not aware of how money is being created, because that is what enslaves us. When people said, "Oh, we are enslaved," and say, "Well, no, we're not. I can go out, I can go on holiday, I can go on a bus." We're enslaved financially through debt, and I think it's really important to understand that. And then I'm pretty sure you'll want to jump on board and join Russell on these amazing courses. Russell, thank you very much. It's been great.
It's been a pleasure.
All
I'm
right, so
grateful.
I'll see you